Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Gym Academy podcast. In this episode, we covered the first 90 days and the things you can do to improve the retention there. But there's a lot more you can do past that 6-month mark. So be sure to join us next time Bob's on here to see what happens and how you can keep your gym members even longer past that point whenever it becomes just redundant and we're not just relying on systems and processes anymore. We have to rely on a solid community. If you like this episode, be sure to share it with a gym owner that you know, or just share it on your social media because that's the only way we grow. So I definitely appreciate you taking the time, and thank you for being a best part of Gym Academy podcast. So last time we were talking, man, I'm super excited to have you back on here, and I have not stopped thinking about the one thing that kind of became a bottleneck for you was the fact that you had a leaky bucket. You were killing on the front end, but you had people falling out the back end, and it made it very difficult to sustain a business if you didn't have a constant inflow of new customers coming in. So what's some stuff that you started doing to fix that leaky bucket on the back end?
When it comes to like solving that leaky bucket, which is ultimately retention, how do we improve retention in a gym, in a studio, whatever? I think my belief around it and kind of our premise inside of the academy, so to speak, for it is going to be a little bit different than a lot of other people. It's not hacks. It's not anything like that. And this was something new to me where I realized I had the leaky bucket. I was like slapped in the face with it. I think I was saying probably last time, I don't remember, but I remember being I was in New York City. I was at an event and I'm like, okay, my recurring revenue, I have this many clients. Like it should be this. And then we just added this many more clients. So we should be up here. Why the hell is my revenue where it's at? Like it didn't hit where it should have been. And I think it was like one of my first, it was like a bad month. And after just absolutely printing. And I really discovered that revenue hides inefficiencies. And scaling, at one point in time, when I was scaling the gyms, we crushed it with our acquisition. Between our offer, ads, our sales systems, everything, we were just signing up people left and right. Unfortunately, that also meant that we were just so focused on new ones coming in that we had no idea if they were converting. We didn't really have certain processes for it, because we were signing up so many people. It was like, cool, we'll just replace them with the next one, which is just pros and cons to that kind of mentality. But it wasn't always this case. I was thinking about this is when I first opened my gyms, I never planned on building what I built. It was just, I had that single location. I was like, I'm a great trainer. Let me have this location. I'm going to initially train athletes. I'm going to do semi-private training and all that. I didn't have a retention issue. And I actually really still firmly believe to this day, if you have only 100 clients, you shouldn't have a retention issue. At worst, a bad month should be 5% monthly attrition. Early on, retention wasn't a problem because my product was so good. The product was so good because I was primarily delivering it, and then one other individual who then worked hand in hand with me. So it was pretty much like a duplicate human being. The way I trained, exactly he trained. We had the same, essentially the system in which I created as far as training was very much as aligned because he came in actually as an intern, then a part-time employee, and then eventually became full-time. But it was using the modality of training, which I think we were even aligned on prior to him coming in. And then it was just cool, here's how it was. We got amazing results for clients and they stayed. So retention wasn't an issue. Then all of a sudden we started getting a lot of new clients in. And actually at first, I didn't keep any of them. And part of it was looking back at it, I can think of a multitude of reasons as to why. But I remember it was the first 3 months, none of those people I signed up continued as members afterwards, which was also another mistake is because after they did my front end offer, I didn't have them pay and I gave them a bunch of free time. And people that don't pay attention. That was a lesson early on, but that's not why I had that leaky bucket later on, because they were all paying. When I looked at it, ultimately, we didn't have a great process that came down to creating an experience that people wanted to be a part of and did not want to leave. So whenever I look at solving a leaky bucket issue, there's a handful of things. Number one, I think there's a blanket statement people can say, it's hey, it's a retention issue. Ultimately, if clients are saying it's a retention issue, yes. But if somebody leaves in the first 30, 60, 90 days, it's a different reason than somebody leaving after 90 days. Somebody that's been a member for 6 months, a year, 18 months, they're going to be leaving for different reasons. And it's really, I think, important to identify where is the actual leak happening so that it can solve the right problem. Of course, I can give some blanket statements and we could talk about that a little bit later if you want, but the difference between conversion and actual retention, attrition. But number one is I think if you have a leaky bucket, it always comes down to the product. If the product isn't any good, people are not going to stay. And the product inside of gyms is the training that we're actually delivering. It's the service that we're providing. So something that happened a long time ago for a lot of gyms that first started doing, let's say, challenge-based marketing or anything like that, or maybe a gym owner, the first time they start running ads and they start bringing in a stranger into their business and they go, oh man, these people, they're not any good. They don't stay. and they're not as good as like these referrals or anything like that. And I think is dog shit. What it ends up doing is it just highlights where the issues are inside of the business, where the product inefficiencies are, which is ultimately is the service in which we're delivering. So when I took a look at, hey, we're not actually ultimately converting these members, and we really changed the focus to focusing on what happens inside of that essentially conversion window, and then what our customer experience looks like after that, and really even throughout the entire thing. I took it where we were just like a churn factory to then over the next like 12 months was like 4.5%, like attrition on a monthly basis across all 8 locations from really focusing on that. So we can go like super deep on all that, but I think the number one biggest thing is if you have a churn issue, it is a product issue. It is the training in which you're delivering is not up to the standard in which your clients, whether it's new or old, are expecting when they, essentially pay you for the value.
I couldn't agree more. Like at the end of the day, and I've just had a conversation with one of my team members about this, like if people leave, it's a product issue. They'll say it's a price issue, but it's always a product issue.
Oh yeah.
Now, being a product issue is a very broad statement, right? So how did you dive deep and figure out exactly where the lacking points were that was causing people to leave? And let's use that like conversion time frame, because I know obviously it changes after that 90 days, but what did you start implementing and how did you find those weak points?
So I probably went a little bit simpler to identify what the actual problem was by doing kind of just 2 things. This is how I kind of just was like, hey, what's going on? Like, why are people leaving? Is I just inspected what I expected. Like number one, and I think this is how simple it can be, and I think this is where a lot of people make a mistake, is we almost like try and make it as complicated as possible. Human nature is to make simple things complex, and a lot of times it is something that's just staring us right in the face, slapping us in the face, that's actually the issue. So just go into your business and treat it like you're a lead or like you're a customer. And this is then something I believe you should consistently do, but that was like the first thing we did. Okay, so we have a leaky bucket. Where is the leak actually happening? In order to essentially find it, to then eventually prescribe a solution, we have to understand and like get deep into the diagnosis, what's actually causing it, where it's coming from, all of that. So I needed to and we had systems, we had SOPs, we had all that stuff inside of the business. So some people may not have that, and that is a really good thing you need to build. I also did not have that all the time. That was a later thing, which I think is actually an important thing. But once I inspected what I expected, I just looked in, I started watching classes, and I would show up unexpected. I would not tell my team that I was coming in. I would show, because I wanted to see like how they are in their natural habitat, and that's actually just generally, by the way, how I would go to my gyms when I was completely out of the day to day, is there was usually a gym that I would go to more often, like my HQ, so to speak, or essentially the one that was closest to me and had like more space, office space. But I would just be like, hey, I'm going to go to this. I would just decide, I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this gym today. I'm going to go to that gym. I might hit 3 gyms in one day. I might hit 1 gym in one day. I would try and go at different times, make sure I see different team members. But then I'm just observing it. If a lead comes in, what ends up happening? If somebody walks in, how is that individual greeted? Do we have, because all of my gyms did the same workouts at every single location at all sessions. It's like, okay, are they all following the same exercise, the same program for the day? Are they coaching the exercises in the actual same way? Is, the way that we're answering a phone and calling leads, like when we are doing it, is it following the actual processes and scripts we have? Number one is I had to inspect what I expect to identify where the issue is, and you can identify it. Then from there, you can actually provide the training on the issue that's actually happening. I think it's easy. We can talk a lot about like getting clients and all that stuff. And I think a lot of times people don't talk about keeping clients. And then when they start shifting maybe into more of a business mindset for the gym, hey, I got to get clients so that I can increase my revenue and all that good stuff. But we forget what keeps them is the product. So how can I get the product better, which is my team, which is consistent training. So then once I kind of identified where the issue is, we just consistently trained on those issues. Now we can get super complex and like how then we baked it in, because that's a little reactive. And we want to be proactive. So we can talk about like reactive and proactive measures, but like that was a reactive thing. So I had to go and identify it. Then I had to train on where the issues were, which was mostly just the product and the consistency in the product. And then we also found that it was more of a conversion issue, which was more people were just falling through the cracks. Even though we'd add a shit ton of people, not all of them would stay after like the initial trial period. So it's like, okay, how do we increase the consumption? How do we get them to the results faster? How do we get them indoctrinated into what we do here so that they don't actually want to leave afterwards? But that's ultimately how we went in and did it and fixed it and solved it.
What were some of the factors you found that resulted in people staying longer? Was it touch points? Was it like, having more educated trainers, like buying more CPTs or some shit like that? Like what did you find that actually got people to stay more?
It was definitely not a more educated trainer. I will tell you that. And I feel like you teed that one up a little bit.
A little bit, maybe a little bit.
So actually, I found the team is going to be the most important. Is the team and how much they care about your clients is going to be one of the most important factors for retention, word of mouth, all of that. So actually what I hired for was personality. I cannot train you on a personality. Do I want to hang out with this? Will my clients want to hang out with this individual? Are you interesting, entertaining, whatever? Can you have a conversation? Like, not everybody can have a conversation. And if you can't have a conversation, like, good, we're going to move on. So that actually is, I think, extremely important. And then I would train them on my system. Here is the Legion way. This is how we did stuff. This was our program design. This was our progression. This is how we did it. And it was like, and this is how we coached our sessions, our classes, so exercises and all that stuff. It was like, cool, like, hey, everybody's going to be teaching the same thing, because it didn't matter if you're at location 1 or location 8, they should be getting the same experience, which I think is extremely, when you start getting to that multi-location level, by the way, is extremely important, because people will know, like a lot of friends and family at other locations, and they're going to talk about, hey, what did you do? How did you do this? If all of a sudden, like, person A is showing something like this, person B is coaching something like this, was actually part of the issue. Now going just tangents, but like one of the things that we found is there was inconsistencies in the coaching, is maybe people were coaching a squat differently or teaching a progression differently, of one of the exercises, or honestly, they changed the fucking workouts that were supposed to be done. So then it wasn't even within the system, which people came in. That was a huge issue. So we had to make sure that we actually corrected that so that there was consistency, because so many trainers come in and they're like, oh, it's all about the workouts. Like, that's not what it's about. That's not why people are coming. Yes, you should have an amazing program. That is a foundation, because your program design is then going to get the client the result, part of the pie to get them the result. With trainers, like I hired for personality, then we trained them on our system, our way of how we did it. And we encouraged them to bring that unique personality to their sessions and how they did it. So I think that's actually extremely, extremely important, but that's also how we get consistency along the way. And I remember I hired one guy, he was like a former gym owner, had a bunch of the certifications. We broke it out on like training, powerlifting, all that stuff. And he was my worst ever team member. I had clients complaining because they're like, he was playing music on a little speaker, had zero personality, didn't coach interact. And I think also something important to say is, I think the unique thing about coaches' personalities is important. I've had amazing coaches, were super energetic, super bubbly. They brought that kind of energy to sessions. And then I've had coaches that were phenomenal and beloved that were more reserved, like deep, but they were able to still connect. So there was kind of one of the things that we, something we call 7 steps of customer experience that we put in to like kind of ensure that the training aspect was getting done the way we want, depending on the personality. So I don't think people need to like be extroverted to do that. I think you have to, like, I'm an introvert. I had to force myself to get extroverted to communicate and connect and bring some of that energy up for sure. But you don't have to be like a rah kind of individual. So yes, like team, they got to get them great. They don't have to be this super high level with a bunch of certifications. I know a lot of gym owners and trainers look for that. That's actually something I did not look for. I looked for a passion in fitness and somebody that wanted to learn and grow. That's what I cared about, because I could teach them everything else. But once we kind of like looked into it, we noticed that usually there was something happening inside like the first 30 days. There was some sort of disconnect, because somebody joins a program, they get super excited. And we have to remember, like, they come in, it's usually not the first time they've done something, but for my gyms, it was the first time they did something in a long time. So they're coming into something, and for me, a lot of it was like losing weight, burning fat, like that was the type of gym that I had. And they could be intimidated. They could feel like they're not going to be able to complete it. They're not going to be able to do it, or it's too hard. And ultimately, when somebody signs up with something, like they immediately tell them all the reasons why they can't be successful. So one of the things that we had to look into is, okay, how do we immediately overcome buyer's remorse? And I think, and this is something that I see a lot of gyms actually don't do, is we onboarded every new client, and we did it because of the volume that we had. We did it in a large group setting. So all of our new clients, and I actually combined a bunch of the locations, but essentially this would be like on a monthly basis. We'd have a new client onboarding where every single new client had to go to. And this was one of the few things that I would actually usually run, or I had some other team members like managers and stuff that would run it. If you're like semi-private, it should be like a one-on-one onboarding, because usually you're not having as much volume that is coming in. And this might actually be like your assessment. But immediately when somebody comes in, and actually there's a couple steps that need to happen prior, by the way, but this is like the first interaction with the business. You're letting him know, or this is actually one of the first, like once they purchase, the interaction is like, it's confirming they made a really good decision. It's setting up the expectation of everything that's going to be happening from there. And they can kind of get some relief, like, oh, there's an actual plan. This is what I need to do. Now, actually, I should say prior to that, immediately when they buy, most people just forget them. They're like, yeah, come in, and they screw around. You want to be like super clear on what the next steps are. And like we had a follow-up, like once somebody signed up, it was like emails and texts they'd be immediately getting and congratulating them and welcoming into the community and making them feel really excited. And then usually somebody would call them within 24 hours to welcome them into the community. So they're like, oh wow, like I'm not just another number, like I'm a real person and all that. Like that confirms they made a really great decision. Then they would usually come in for some sort of onboarding. We'd sign up people like that wouldn't start for 2-3 weeks because of the way that we had our program start. So then we'd have them in there, we get them excited, we tell them exactly how to have success, exactly how to fail. We'd go over everything that they essentially, like the training and the nutrition and accountability and how we do stuff. We'd usually get their kind of their initial before photos. And then throw out there, like, whereas a lot of people think, oh, you need to call your clients every single week and you need to check in with them. Like, I actually don't think that makes a difference. So, because we actually, when we were taking a look at it, that was like, oh, we need to have this. And we had one gym that just kept calling, I think because he didn't go past the second page, just would only call the same 60 people. And that location had like 450 plus members. So it was like, okay, clearly that's not making a difference. So once we kind of took care of the initial, it was like, okay, what happens when they come in? We had a big community where everybody was in, where we just outlined like, hey, here's day 1, here's day 2, here's day 3. Like I would go live all the time inside of that group. And then we just made sure that when they were actually in the sessions, we followed something called the 7 steps of customer experience, so that every single time they got in there, because what sometimes happens in gyms, not only is the programming suck, but then the way they come in, they feel very uncomfortable. It's the first time they're doing something. Remember, they're new to this, and then other people kind of know each other, so then they feel uncomfortable. They don't know what's going on.
Outsider effect.
That outsider effect. So like we would always make sure like we had like the SOP in place of exactly how it was, from like being greeted right away, saying hi, setting the expectation, and then when it actually came into the training, like even though we were a large group, like boot camps, it was still got 20 touch points in a session. In a 45-minute session, they were getting 20 touch points. I don't care if there's 30 people. The coach was constantly going through out there. So then they felt, even if they didn't know anybody, that they were part of the community. So that's just kind of like some of the small stuff we did initially to kind of start fixing the mostly conversion issues that we had that eventually fixed our attrition issues.
I love the fact, which I knew you would, because this is the one thing that I feel like all attrition issues can always be summed down to one thing: customer experience. You're focusing on the workouts, you're focusing on the things that you think are cool, but you're not focusing on making sure that this person feels like a human and they feel heard, which I love the fact that you dived into that. I was honestly trying to tee you up with that. I'm so sick of hearing about personal training certifications. Like, no one cares about these things. But
dude, nobody gives a shit. And like we actually eventually partnered with somebody that like any new team member came in, we did get them certified and stuff like that. We had our robust training. And I actually encourage a lot of our members inside of it who have like, they have their way of doing things. Awesome. Like, create your own internal certification. Like, something we eventually were going to do was create the Legion certification for all of our trainers and everything like that. We never got around to doing it, but I think that's great. But like, your prospects don't care. Like, they don't, it's like, they don't give a shit if you're CSCS certified. They don't give a shit if you have a kinesiology degree. You care, and you think it's important to other people, and you do it to impress other trainers, but your clients, usually when it's in the sales process, are looking for some level of security. Like, is this person actually going to help me? Have they helped other people like me? And that's actually what they care about. And then when they're there, every step of the way is like consistently reselling them on why they made a great decision and why they need to continue coming in every single day. Because in the beginning, what's really important is you want to make somebody feel really excited to come back. You need to overcome like, hey, I'm going to be sore, I'm going to have headaches, all that stuff if you're helping with like nutrition. You got to get them to come back, because if you run a training-based gym, you want consumption. It's not cheap on a monthly basis. And they have to get results. Because if somebody works out, and we could talk about like real results, because what we think sometimes results are is going to be different for your client. But if they're not getting some level of what they consider to be results, they're not going to keep coming back. It's really that simple.
I couldn't agree more, especially in the first like 90 days, which I call the golden window. If you lose people in that 90 day, it's completely a process issue. But one thing I'm curious to get your take on is that 6-month mark. Like, that's the next big milestone where I see a lot of gyms have a big dip, and it's less about process at this point and normally about redundancy. So did you do anything in your gyms, or have you found a solution to kind of fix that 6-month mark churn?
So it was actually interesting. That was something that we always try to take a look at. Like, how do we, like, okay, we really know what it looks like in the first 30, 42, 60 days, like how to get them to get amazing results, get super bought in. But then, like, what happens when that initial dopamine runs off? What happens when, okay, we're getting through the redundancy and maybe it's tough, or you kind of get that sticking point and stuff like that? Like, guys like you and I, like, we got obsessed with it. Like, both, one of the things common about us is, like, we both have, you still do powerlifting, I think, right? Like, I used to do powerlifting. Now I just train to look great naked. Like, I just want to be jacked and like mobile and feel good and be able to ski. So, but like early on, it's really easy to identify, okay, like here's what I need to have happen, you know, and here's how we can do it. And you want to have it really mapped out for the first 30 days or whatever. And then like once they hit their initial goal, weight loss goal, whatever it is great. So we've done a couple things after that, which I think we did really, really well. And I don't know too many gyms that have done it on the level that we did. And I think I was going through my phone recently. I was like reminding them of a couple of things. It was pretty cool. And it's honestly stuff I'm like pretty fucking proud of. But that was something we really took a look. Okay, so after the initial, kind of when they're coming in, you say it's like processes, and it's like it's to see, but it's like, hey, if they're here on day 7, you do this, on day 14 you do this, on day 21, day 30 they should be here, day 42 or 60 they should have accomplished this. It's all that stuff of what happens afterwards. And I started looking into businesses that have great communities, where then they have like diehard fans, because all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get my customers to become raving fans. Because when they become a raving fan, not only have they already owned the process, they own the results and stuff like that, but then they want to talk about you all the time. Like that was the big thing, is I wanted members at my gym to make us the topic of the dinner table, or when they're at work. Like that was really how I thought about the experiences. Like when they're coming in here, I want them to just be so effing ecstatic that they can't shut up about us. And that actually worked really well. And we had clients that would come 2 times a day. Now, some gyms were like, oh, you got to limit it. I didn't care. You can come as many times as you wanted in a day. The more they came, they became raving fans. That was like super cool. But so some of the things that we did was we kind of switched a little bit more to like session. And this is stuff that we were starting to like dial in later, was we switched a little bit more to like session-based recognition, where it's like, okay, you've completed X amount of sessions. I took this, I took a look at like ClickFunnels and how they did it. Because in ClickFunnels, if you're like like they serve a bunch of marketers and people that build a business, and you could have like your 2 comma award. And it was like essentially, how do you make $1 million on their platform? Well, then it was like, cool, somebody could do that in a month. Somebody, it might take 3 years to get there. But then they would also recognize that individual at like their end of the year. Essentially, like they would give out the awards at the end of the year at their like a big event. So that's kind of what we shifted to. It was like, okay, 100 sessions, 250 sessions, 500 sessions, 1,000 sessions. And like we got it where I think it was like if they hit 1,000 sessions, we would give them like the golden barbell. And it was actually like a full Rogue barbell. That would be pretty sick. Or something they'd be super proud and put up. Other people I know have done it where like they give people like shoes with their name on it or something like that. You could also really highly personalize it and stuff like that, where if you do a really great job and you understand that person, you know who they are, you can always give gifts to family or whatever. But for us, it was like, okay, how do we really systemize this? Okay, maybe it's like session-based awards. And this was something we did like towards the very end, and we were starting to get really dialed in.
I hope you enjoy this episode of the Gym Academy podcast. We covered the first 90 days and how it's mostly systems and processes. However, a lot of gym owners lose a lot of gym members around that 6-month mark. So be sure to join Bob next time to find out how we can make sure we stop the leaky bucket long-term by having an amazing community and the things he did to make sure that he had that community. If you enjoyed this, please share it with a gym owner you think might like it or it might improve their life. We're trying to spread the word out there so we can get as much of an impact and cause as many people who are gym owners to live their lives to the fullest and have less stress while having a thriving business. Thank you so much again for joining us, and can't wait to see you on the next episode.